any interest that they have in any items on the agenda, and it would be helpful if members expressed why they're declaring an interest in the item concerned. Are there any declarations? No. In that case, we'll move on to finance section, and we'll consider items 2 and 3 together and come back to the recommendations at paragraph 3.1 of the budget and council tax report. So item 2, this report is at item 2AA in the budget folder and recommends the budget and council tax for 26-27. Mr. Burr, I believe, will speak to this report. Mr. Burr.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will limit my remarks, given that many of you have heard from me this morning on this report, but this is the committee which recommends to the Comhairle at 4 p.m. Our budget and our council tax setting, so there are some matters I would like to draw specifically to your attention. The purpose of this report is to seek approval of the budget for 2026-27, that's the recommendation to the Comhairle, and to recommend the level of council tax for the same year. And the first point I would want to say on my behalf and Mr. Gomez is that this is a lawful budget and it's a balanced budget. And it's important that you know that. That is our duty, to pass a lawful and balanced budget. In terms of process, worth noting, this budget has not been developed by corporate management team or by any individual officers. This has been overseen by the Budget and Strategy Board since its initial meetings in, I think, October, reporting to Policy and Resources Committee with the addition of contributions at the budget seminar. And many members have asked specific questions about their own thoughts and proposals on the budget, for which we are grateful. But this is a budget which has been developed, as usual, over a number of months. It's been supported by a public consultation, which demonstrated, amongst other things, that there was a clear desire that we use our reserves and that we raise council tax levels as preferable to cuts in services. And this budget proposes both these approaches. 2.2 covers the draft settlement. I won't go through that in detail. It provides another £500,000 at the end of the day for core services. Capital funding, once again, very, very poor. If we weren't supplementing that and hoping to supplement that through the Islands Accelerator model and other sources of funding, we would be very poorly off indeed. That is not a good capital settlement. In January, the Budget and Strategy Board reviewed the range of savings options. These were graded green, amber and red. I think it's fair to say that the amber and the reds were either completely unpalatable or would reduce our service levels to questionable levels of statutory compliance, and that shows the position in which the Comhairle and most other councils in Scotland are in, that it is only the most basic of savings which can now be considered without significant detriment to our services. But having said that, I think corporate management team is to be commended for being able to recommend to you that another 380,000 of savings be taken forward as part of the consideration of this budget. 2.7 details the reserves. We're not proposing significant reduction in the reserves in this budget, and I'll come to that in a moment. This is a one-year budget. Scottish Government operates a one-year budget, and while there is much talk of multi-year planning, there is not multi-year budgeting, but this Comhairle needs to look in a multi-year way. And given the terms of the spending review, which I've set out in detail in paragraph 7.5, these figures are very stark. If you think that we are using reserves, cutting services, increasing council tax with a share of the national cake, which is 26.4, in 2 years' time, it is government policy that reduced to 24.8. Think of where we are going to be then bearing in mind that it is on smaller councils that these burdens traditionally fall, and there are fewer options, and there are fewer options than mainland Scotland in the Western Isles for how we meet that deficit. So that is why this budget recommends only minimal use of reserves. It is certainly the officer's view that reserves should be maintained at the highest possible level for next year, 27-28, and 28-29, when the spending review already forecasts that there will be a reduction in the local government share of the cake. Those are political decisions, of course. They may not happen. There will be much work, I'm sure, by COSLA, by councils. We have a Scottish Parliament election in May. There may be changes of policy, but that is what the spending review introduced by the Cabinet Secretary in Parliament on 13 January says. It says that our share as a sector is going to fall, and it is my and Mr. Gomez's duty to present to you options which protect us as best we can from that eventuality. 2.8 refers to the IJB budget, the Integration Joint Board. Current indications are that there's a funding gap of around 2.8 million in that budget. That's not unusual. Pro rata, all IJBs across Scotland have deficits. Now, that can be met from IJB reserves this year, but these reserves are expected to be fully exhausted this year. So that sum notionally has to be added to the Corley's own deficit for future years, and I will come back to my point about reserves after that. 2.9, the welcome funding on extended producer responsibility. I think that's a very wise recommendation that we use 1.5 million of that this year and retain 2.1 for next year's budget. I'll come back to the recommendations, Chair, if I may. I'm not going to go through the report in detail. You'll be relieved to know it's all there in significant detail. 7.5 details the spending reviews implications. Crown Estate is the subject of a separate report on this agenda, but there is a clear link between the budget that we set and our use of Crown Estate monies, and that is why these two reports are on the same agenda. Council tax, there's a recommendation there with projections. We would be expected to remain well below the national average in terms of council tax, even with the increase, which is clearly above inflation, but we have known for some years that above inflation increases will be required, and that reflects the result also of the public consultation, which told us to look at our council tax levels. Proposals there for increased levy on second and empty homes, that's at 8.5. Now that is contingent legislation. It's anticipated that that bill will become law, but for the purposes of budgetary planning, if it doesn't, those would be covered from balances. But it is anticipated that that legislation will be enacted shortly, and that would allow us to implement that decision if you make it. Forward strategy. Our financial strategy continues to consist of these three elements. Ongoing political strategy, that's about the local government share, the floor, and our share of the cake within the local government cake, and also, of course, of island proofing. Phased use of reserves, very apparent in this budget, and the identification, if we can, of further savings. You can see and you know how difficult that is. We have squeezed another 380,000 out of, or thereabouts, out of the system, and those were anything amber and red on those lists we have not been able to take forward. Underlying deficit was 4.49 million, potentially increasing in the next year. Integrated impact assessment, as usual, all these proposals have had an initial integrated impact assessment, and any further assessments will come back to you through the service committees. So in conclusion, I think the key phrase for me is this budget and financial strategy provides the Comhairle with the capacity to respond as effectively as possible to the financial situation which it faces. I don't think that's in any way a defeatist kind of conclusion. We are required to manage, we are required to respond. We're required to respond as effectively as possible in terms of what we do. What do? We deliver statutory services, we act as community leader, and we act as an effective external advocate for the Western Isles. This budget gives the Comhairle the capacity to respond as effectively as possible in this and, in my submission, future years. From an officer perspective, this is the healthiest recommendation, I think, that can be made in today's circumstances. It proposes the minimum possible level of additional savings so that our services and the people for whom we work do not see a reduced level of service. So it has the minimum proposed reduction in services, and it has the most limited use of reserves. I will come perhaps in the Crown Estate report to talk further about the need for reserves, but I will just say at the moment there are known factors such as the IGB deficit, which you will have to deal with in future years. There are reasonably predictable issues such as bus tendering, winter maintenance, the loss of shared prosperity fund, which is significant, but I'll come to these, Chair, when I present the Crown Estate report. So in conclusion, and to take you back to the recommendations necessary to go through these one by one, it's recommended that this committee recommend that the Comhairle accept the settlement, agree the budget strategy set out in the report, including the savings, approve the draft budgets, agree the delegated budget for the Integration Joint Board, agree to a council tax increase of 9.5%, agree to the principle of an additional levy. Why is it just a principle? That's because the legislation hasn't been passed. To note the capital allocation, to note the financial risks, I think those are apparent. Agree, of course, that the Budget and Strategy Board monitor future progress. To note that Mr. Gomez and colleagues will be updating the medium-term financial plan, and agree that a budget strategy update is accordingly presented to the June meeting of Policy and Resources Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions or comments on that report, the presentation from Chief Executive? Mr. Gomez, anything you want to add to that? No. Happy to take questions. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. Just a question. Does the budget, in terms of staffing levels, support anyone in the care system, either in a care home or being cared for at home, to have a daily bath if they should request one?
Mr. Barr?
I'm afraid that's a level of operational service detail, Chair, in which I can't assist. Maybe Ms. McSween.
Ms. McSween, can you come in on that one?
Yes, Leader. Excuse me. That's to do with eligibility criteria, not the council budget setting process. So I'm happy to discuss that separately with Councillor Murray if he wishes.
Through the IGB, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Then, Mr. Murray? Yeah. No bother. Councillor McLean? Sorry, Ray Callum was in first, then I'll bring you in, Ray. Councillor McLean?
Sorry, Mr. McKenzie, for jumping in front of you, but thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of the P&R, but
oh, well, maybe I'll cut you off here. No, Callum, go ahead.
It's to do with the 31H. I see that they attain the level of uncommitted reserves. Can I ask, is there other reserves that the council have that are not uncommitted? I'm asking that.
I'll bring Mr. Gomez in on this one. Sandy?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think it's just the terminology of it. The 3.5 million of uncommitted reserves is the minimum balances that we're holding, which is around 2% of our overall budget. There are other general reserves which are free for other use, which is what sometimes we call the uncommitted reserves, because they are uncommitted in that they are general. They're slightly separate to what the minimum balances are.
There are committed reserves as well, which are.
And there are committed reserves, which we term the earmarked reserves.
Are you able to tell us how much is in these reserves apart from this 3.5 uncommitted reserves?
Yeah, the general reserves are approximately 4.5 million. So those are also free for, these are what we talk about as being used for future budget setting processes. Earmarked reserves, there's a considerable amount in there. I'd need to get back to you with an exact figure, but we've put this up to Budget and Strategy Board in the past, and I can get that figure for you.
Yeah, I think it'll be in the folder.
Analysis of these figures, you're at least £8 million in reserves, plus probably over the 10 million. So we're in a pretty good position, folks.
With a 4.9 million deficit, yeah. Plus 3 million, plus 12 million the year after that. So yeah. Any other comments? Sorry, Ray, you want to come back in? Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. There's something I must have missed at some point, but I see the report refers to a date of, I think it's 6th or 2nd of February. Anyway, it's to do with the toilets. Now, I know you spoke earlier on today, I think it was to Councillor Macaulay, and the Chief Executive said something about that a recommendation or an amendment or something could be put forward at this meeting.
There's a recommendation in the Crown Estate report. So the next report is covered in that one. It's covered in the Crown Estate report, the next one that's coming up.
Okay. Yeah. Right, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Macaulay?
Thanks, Chair. No member of the committee. You're used to that. Probably to bring this a bit late to the table, but it's something I didn't really home in on until now. Is sorry, I hadn't really homed in on this. It's just too late in the game to look at the bus fares that are going up by 25% and suggest that that could come out of the Crown Estate Service Treasures Fund. 25% on a bus fare, I just feel is quite high. And apologies for, like I say, my lunchtime reading or rereading.
Potentially too late, I think, yeah. We need to get into the detail of what that meant and have a report on the facts around it. So I don't know if that's possible to do today. Yeah.
Sorry, was that?
No.
No.
Yeah, I think it's probably too late because we'd have to have a report on what that would mean in terms of what would change it to. And
Okay. Can I ask how much that comes to, that 25%? It's probably in here somewhere.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a single adult fare that's gone up by 25%. The return fares and the 10 journey fares are at the 5%. So it's just to kind of reflect the increase that we probably should have applied over the last 10 years, but never did. So
Sorry, can you repeat the first bit? I didn't hear. Sorry.
it's only the single adult fare
Okay.
that's gone up by the 25%. The return fares and the multi-journey fares are going up to a maximum 5%.
Okay.
So regular users should be taking advantage of the returns.
Yeah.
10 journey.
Thank you. I didn't appreciate that detail. Thank you.
there's also the cap that's going to be in place as well. Yeah.
Yes, the £2 cap came in for quite a number of the journeys in the islands this week as well.
You content with that? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments from members of the PNR committee and anyone on any other committees who'd like to come in? No. In that case, just one comment I want to make myself. Item E on the recommendations 3.1. We're agreeing to a council tax increase of 9.5%, and the chief executive set out quite fairly the reason that we came to that position, and And the reason it's in the papers in front of us, I think the line you used was the healthiest recommendation from officers. I think you're absolutely right. As politicians, we also have to have other considerations in terms of the public and what they're asking of us. And since this has been out, there's been quite a lot of lobbying and a lot of contact from members of the public and also within the chamber in talking to other members, feeling that 9.5% is possibly a little bit too high. So as chair of the committee, I'm going to suggest that we reduce that 9.5% to 8.5%. And if the committee are willing for me to do that and change that recommendation, then that will be what we put forward as the budget setting at the meeting in the afternoon at the full council. Are the committee in agreement with that change? Councillor Macaulay?
How can that one be done and not mine?
Well, yours can be done if you want to put forward an amendment.
No. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you just finished telling me the bus stuff can be discussed or changed, but that one can't.
Well, like I say, that one would need some more detail on it in terms of what it involved. But if you want to put forward an amendment,
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I have a quick
the
question.
short answer was no. But I was
Quick question. I missed this one as well. When did it come down from 10 to 9.5?
9.5 at the budget seminar when we were just
So
discussing.
that was okay.
That's
Thanks.
right, yeah, but since then, like I say, I've listened to what people are saying. I think it's appropriate that we listen. So they asked us to reduce it. So proposal to go down. Councillor Finnegan.
Chair, what's the difference? How much of a loss is that in terms of revenue?
In terms of revenue, it's about 150,000. So it's significant.
Significant, yeah.
Yeah. You see, if members aren't keen for me to do it, then that's fine. But if members are content, then we will put that forward as a recommendation. Agreed? Okay, we'll move on to item 3. And this is the recommendations from service committees, and it's been uploaded to SharePoint. And I suppose just in terms of this committee, do members, sorry, Derek, do you want to come in?
Sorry, you were considering that along with
the
budget report and
yeah.
the proposed budget to Comhairle will be amended accordingly to to reflect the 8.5%.
Okay, so do members agree to the recommendation of paragraph 3.1 of the Budget and Council Tax 2026-27 report together with the recommendations from service committees? Agreed? In that case, we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda. At the meeting at 11:30 a.m, the committee agreed to defer this item to this meeting, and the report concerns the distribution of round 7 of the Crown Estate Revenues funding to the Comhairle and recommends an allocation of the funding across core service requirements, strategic projects and community-led distribution. It suggested that the maximisation of impact and resource at ward level continue to be delivered through the Comhairle Coastal Community Fund targeted at community economic development and wealth building. There's a scheme of administration for the funding at Appendix 1 to the report, and I will pass over to the Chief Executive to talk us through it. Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Chair. This is a joint report also with the Chief Officer for Economic and Community Regeneration, and it's a report, I think, which should be very welcomed by members because it shows, first of all, a significant increase of 610,000 or so in our Crown Estate income, taking it to the highest total ever of 2,476,000. That always comes with the warning, and it is correct that payments are annual. They cannot be presumed to continue, and they certainly cannot be presumed to increase in every year. But this does give, I think, the Chamber some very welcome choices about use of this funding. Now, again, in terms of process, members have seen this report in advance of it appearing on the agenda. I think we went through the detail at the Budget and Strategy Board and, more importantly, at the Budget Seminar. So there are additions to the report, so bear with me as I take you through all of these. I'll come back to the recommendations at the end. But turning to paragraph 7, that report notes that the deficit is around 4.1 million, and while there's no commitment, and rightly, in each year to continue any funding, there was a strong feeling at the seminar following the recommendation of officers that we continue to support for a further year the items set out in 7.2 and 7.3 and 7.4, evening bus services, athletes travel and community transport. And that, I think, reflects in respect of the transport and evening bus services, that reflects for Lewis and Harris anyway, the imminence of the tendering process and the continuation of the current contracts. Now, 7.5 onwards brings matters to your attention, some specific matters, support for creative industries. That notes that we provided 71,000 of round 6, that's last year, Crown Estate funding as transitional funding to specific creative industry organisations, and these are listed there. That has been a managed reduction in funding. Many of these organisations have been aware of the Comhairle's decision in that regard, and many of them have approached us to indicate how they would appreciate future support, but have indicated that they are implementing our decisions as you would expect. Others, as is well known, have made different representations. It is recommended that, of course, we continue to support the creative and cultural sector as our resources allow, and as I said at the budget seminar, I think to considerable support. It's an option for you to continue to provide a funding stream from next year's Crown Estate funding. It's suggested that be in the region of £110,000. That's broadly equivalent to previous years, but that includes, of course, a 30,000 budget for Gaelic and heritage grants. It's important that you note that. That's no different. But that this would be a bid fund, outcome-based, with applications for support being invited across the creative industries, heritage, Gaelic language and culture spectrum. We have received representations in the past that the funding should be more open than simply awarding it to named organisations. So that is an option for you. Ward Initiative Fund, I think I'm aware there's an amendment later on about the amount of Ward Initiative Fund, but this notes that there is considerable underspend. I suspect there will be less underspend than there was when we brought this to the budget seminar earlier this month, but it obviously makes sense to use an underspend to reduce the commitment to next year's Ward Initiative Fund, presuming, as I think you will, you want to continue that funding. One-offs, minimum income standard research. This was well received at the budget seminar. This is joint work with Orkney and Shetland and Argyll and Bute. I think the other two councils have not chosen to support this work, which I think is unfortunate. This will provide us with an academically sound, strongly evidenced piece of work about the true cost of living in the Western Isles and in parts of the Western Isles. And that is pretty critical to our arguments in support of island proofing and other kinds of financial support. That's a one-off cost. On turning to 712 on the Royal National Mod, we are recommending after discussions with Uncommon Gaelach, and I commend Uncommon for its approach to us and to our recognising our financial situation. We've agreed that the Comhairle's contribution to a mod will be capped at 175,000. So what is suggested in the table to which I'll come is just the balance from what's in the current budget to take it up to 175. The Energy Development Officer post, we're suggesting that a 2-year post be funded all in 1 year. And the reasons for that are set out in the report. And again, these were supported at the budget seminar. Moving on to core budget services funded last year from Crown Estate. Public conveniences mentioned earlier, these are there at 7.15. Waste services, grants to Gaelic organisations, but it's recommended that that's incorporated within the support to creative industries. Likewise, heritage grants. 7.19 covers the funding of the rental costs in the town hall from Stornoway Historical Society with a proposal which can only be for noting there that be supported through ward initiative or Crown Estate ward funding for members representing the Stornoway area or its area forum. Now, new to the report are 720 onwards and 724. 720 concerns the Stornoway Abattoir. Members' views were mixed on whether this funding be included. I've set out, with the help of others, the facts. I won't read that to you. The Abattoir Member Officer Working Group, of course, is still to conclude its work. But it is acknowledged, I think, by all that if the abattoir is to continue, it will require an ongoing level of subsidy. And that would be of the order of £60,000. As a matter of policy, I think it has to be stated that this is perhaps the year in which the Chamber will have to decide on its position on the abattoir. If it is deemed to be a core service, then the budget should be returned to core budgets and something else taken from that budget to balance, rather than continuing to fund the abattoir from Crown Estate. Because if it is, there is a policy choice there, and no doubt that will be influenced if you decide to support the abattoir for a further year. That will have to be decided, I think, in the course of next year. Two potential funding sources. It could obviously come from the Corporate and Service Pressures Fund, or it could come perhaps from contributions from Lewis and Harris members, Crown Estate ward allocations. That would amount to 7,500 per ward. 7.24 is a small amount, just the cost of school lets to the fashion. That's around, I think, 7,000. We can meet these from underspends in Crown Estate, so that is just there for noting, really. But because it's it would be meeting the costs from underspend, it's here for your information. So the total sum recommended for ongoing support is therefore 72,930 or 32,930 if you take the abattoir into account. Moving on to section 8 on corporate and service pressures, it is recommended that you take a substantial sum of this year's substantially increased Crown Estate monies for use for corporate and service pressures. There is no requirement on Crown Estate that monies be spent in any financial year, and we've always carried forward as appropriate. Now, the reason I suggest that is not so that we can put money in the bank and gaze at it. That's not the purpose of public money. But there are particular service pressures which you can reasonably anticipate in the next financial year. You have the retendering of bus services in Lewis and Harris. You have winter maintenance. You have the loss of Shared Prosperity Fund. That's gone completely. We have, as you know, and with your approval, managed to retain these vital services and employees in financial inclusion, in apprenticeships, in other areas too, for the immediate period, but that cannot be sustained for financial year 27-28. And if you wish to continue these services, as you might, because you've been very supportive of the current course of action, then these are the kind of funds you need to have at your disposal. That can't be done out of small underspends or savings on core budgets. That needs a strategic or a corporate or a service pressures fund to enable you to make these choices. As I said, it's not an emergency fund. It's not for short-term funding relief. The use of this fund is linked to service change, improvement, corporate transformation, and these key non-statutory services, such as financial inclusion, which are so important to many in the community. So the recommended sum there, it's just a balancing figure, obviously, is 756,111. That would reduce, depending on other decisions you may take on the abattoir and other anything else that's coming through by way of amendment. But the point is that in officer's recommendation, it is essential that there is a substantial sum for corporate and service pressures, not a vague thing, service pressures that can reasonably be anticipated. So to conclude, a summary of the proposals are there in the table. That does not include any decision on the abattoir, so that would have to be adjusted accordingly. Turning to our own Coastal Communities Fund, that's for the delivery of community projects. Again, recognising the increase in Crown Estate Round 7 funding, it's proposed that each ward receive the sum of £100,000 next year. That's the highest ever. It was 94 in the last year, and it's right, if you wish to continue to fund our own Coastal Communities Fund, that it be increased accordingly. Appendix 1 has the scheme of administration and related details on that. So in conclusion, Chair, the approach we would submit remains consistent with our corporate strategy and the overall objective of benefiting coastal communities. There are balance, the recommendations as ever, between addressing the current financial deficit, the pressures on our service budgets now and anticipated, supporting strategic priorities such as energy, the energy post, minimum income standard, support for creative industries, and also continuing to support community level priorities at local areas. So turning back very quickly to the recommendations, note what's gone before, agree the recommendations subject to your debate on the abattoir and anything else. Agree the recommendations for allocation proposed at 8.5. To note the scheme of administration for the Coastal Communities Fund, that's our Coastal Communities Fund. And finally, across the page, should it be agreed to establish a culture and creative industries fund, Ms Murray will submit a scheme of administration for that to Sustainable Development Committee at the next series of meetings. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Could I ask for members of the committee to make questions first? Councillor Kine.
Well, thank you, Chair. I would support all that Chief Executive's outlined there. That's recommended. And given that the abattoir MOG is still to report, I would recommend that we support the abattoir as recommended for the next financial year until we have a plan in place for its sustainable future.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief Executive, for the report, and I'm fully supportive on all of it apart from the abattoir, and it's something I've really been struggling with as a crofter and supporting a crofting ward. I find it difficult in the current situation we're in financially as a council and trying to be representative for the whole of the Western Isles. And reading 7.23 especially, the MOG acknowledged that while operated by the Comhairle, the abattoir will require an ongoing level of subsidy to remain viable. So we've already given, was it 90,000 over the last 2 years? We're looking at another 60,000 this year, and it still won't be viable. And while operated by the Comhairle, that's not to say that it can't be viable. I recognise its importance to the community and to crofting, but it's clear that operated by the Comhairle, it's not viable. And there may be other operating models that need to be looked at to make it viable. And I think that's what should be looked at first before we consider allocating 60,000 of Crown Estate money to this, bearing in mind we've just agreed to reduce our income by 150,000 by reducing the council tax for the whole of the Western Isles. We're spreading that throughout the whole of the Western Isles. We have to look at how the impact of everything is throughout the whole of the islands, not just one part. And that's why I find it difficult to find support for this, given that in the US, I believe they have a totally separate area that's not run by the council. And if it can be done there, then I would hope that in Lewis and Harris it should be run. I've had no correction. I've had one representation in the last year and a half since I became a councillor from a crofter complaining about the prices for the abattoir, and that's the only representation I've had. I've had more for other issues, and from that reason, I can't support that part.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other views, Councillor McLean?
I don't go along with what Councillor MacLeod has said. I go along with what Mr. Crichton has proposed here, simply because the crofting, being a member of the MOG, crofting is an integral part of our culture and our heritage. And there are plenty of people who I've spoken to about the prices of it. I think Mr. MacLeod should go to a few sales, and he might, that's both cattle and sheep sales, he might see that amongst the crofting fraternity. The MOG have gone through it quite systematically and have acknowledged that there is a problem. And the problem is really essentially about prices and about what's having to be done through health and safety and all that within the abattoir itself. But we must never lose sight of the fact that as well, that within the 3 months or 4 months of the working of the abattoir, there are quite a number of full-term equivalent members of staff actually engaged in the abattoir as well. And these are essential as well for us. But there is the crofting is full-time as well within that, because it's a subsidiary occupation for many, so that those people involved in crofting also are looking at that as subsistence payment as well for their work. So there is in fact that. We're forgetting the whole thing about crofting does not just involve the abattoir, but it involves families as well. And these families are working their crofts, which we are. We are a crofting community, and we want to actually promote that, as we're trying to do as well within the arts. We're trying to promote that as well. There's £110,000 going towards the arts initiative there, for the arts to come in and actually bid for that. So there is, we're subsidising buses for our community as well, community buses as well. So we live in an island that should be better supported by central government, but aren't. And this is the problem that we have. And if we could get more help from central government, from Scottish government, then this would not be the case. And that's true with the crofting community as well. So I believe that we should do this. The MOG are looking into, have been systematically trying to find out ways in which the abattoir can be productive, and I'm sure they will continue to do so. So I would recommend this for this year in particular.
I'll bring Councillor MacLeod back in, and then I've got Paul and Ian and Sweeney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not saying we shouldn't have an abattoir here, but I'm just asking the question, which our Chief Executive has already raised, is whether actually the council should be running this. And at the moment, we are continuing to subsidise it. I think I'm asking the question, and it's maybe a difficult question, but we do have to look at how it's run. And if it's not going to be sustainable, then we have already said to other groups they have to go and find their own funding, because we can no longer sustain them. But we have made a bid fund where folk can bid and provide evidence that they are doing something and that there is something substantial at the end of it. I think crofting is a major part of our culture and heritage, and I'm fully supportive of it. But also, we as a local authority have to make some difficult decisions, and hand on heart, given some of the choices that we have, I feel stronger to support money spent for, the example, 50,000 later on supporting mental health services for our young people throughout the Western Isles, which is a better spend than this, I think. And I'd be supportive of a new way of working for the abattoir, but I think time has come to either accept as a council that we run it and we run for the whole of the Western Isles, or we provide support to anyone by way of grant to anybody wanting to run an abattoir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll bring the other members in shortly, but just to kind of clarify, so the Chief Executive has made that point as well. I think this is the year, and Donald touched on it as well, we need to decide, are we subsidising the abattoir going forward or are we not? Are we subsidising short term through this fund to allow the MAUG to present to committee and then to come to a position on the future? Should that be, like you suggested, there might be an option for a grant and a private company to run it, or different ways of doing it? But I think what's coming through so far in the discussion is that the abattoir is something that people would like to keep, but how we run it and whether we should be running it or whether we should be looking for someone to take it on and us to support them through a different funding method. That seems to be what I'm picking up. So I'll come to Councillor Finnegan, who's shaking his head.
No, I mean, I would just argue, just in reply to what's been said already. I mean, are UIST and Barra not crofting communities, and they support their own abattoirs. And I think it's something. I mean, I'm perfectly agree with Councillor Crichton. I'm prepared to look at it for this year, but certainly what we've done with the arts is in terms of cutting that back each year, and I think we have to seriously look at that now, because we're fighting for an amendment here later on mental health, and we've got to. Yeah. There's no easy decisions. Every single decision is going to be a tough, hard decision, and we have to start making them, I'm afraid. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think sorry, Councillor McLean.
Yeah, just a point. The UIST and Barra are taking some animals into the Stornoway abattoir. Am I right? There's some of them have been taken. Yeah.
Actually, I think there has been small numbers taken.
Small numbers, yeah, but yeah, I think there are abattoirs in UIST and Barra, and like the point was made is that they're not being supported to this level. So like I say, I think there's something through the MAUG, through the presentation of the report and through discussion, but I also think it's something we should discuss throughout the year so we know before we get to budget setting next year what the position is and what the ways forward. I think reserves are going to keep going up. That's Councillor Murray's phone rang and Councillor Crichton's £10 each. Okay, Councillor McLean, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. Fully support the new fund for creative industries. I'm not sure who's going to be in charge of sort of deciding who the applications go to, but I presume be a member of his working group or something like that. I would just like to hope that it goes not only to large organisations and festivals, that it will also go to individuals who may be wanting to record or indeed get tuition in musical instruments. It would be really great if that fund was used throughout the Western Isles for raw talent like that. I was going to say the abattoir might sound of a surprise to some of you, but I don't know much about sheep up here. But I think it should be maybe taken from the Treasures Fund, and we decide next year. I was going to mention lastly the Service Treasures Fund. It is a large amount of money, 756,000. It's even larger than the increase that we got. Given that each individual ward is only getting an extra £6,000, a lot of the money is going into this, and it seems to me like it's a reserve fund on top of the other reserves, a reserve of the reserve fund. But I think it's going to be, I think it's well thought out in saying that, because there is going to be no doubt pressures on us this year with bus services and things like that. What I would like to propose, if that's the right word, can I propose something? Am I allowed to propose something? Can I propose that any unspent funds in that fund goes back into the Crown Estate, and when we're sitting here next year, we can reassess how much is needed. There's going to be no bus tenders next year. There's going to be lots of things that's not going to be there, and I think it's only fair that that money, I think we were already it's like reward money at the end of the day. If it's not used, it's getting sit pep, it's going back in. I think very much think this is an awful lot of money, and I'm not saying I've seen any underspend. We should get a report of what the money was spent on, and any underspend or non-spend as it may be. I suppose it won't be an unspend if it's not allocated yet, but any money not allocated to anything should go back in. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring in the Chief Executive.
No, it's not.
Yes, Chair, happy to address that, but that will happen anyway, because the fund cannot be spent without Policy and Resources Committee considering use of that spend. It's a fund allocated, if you choose to do that, for service pressures, but which service pressures receive which amount of funding is a matter for this committee. And just like other Crown Estate underspends, it will come back to the budget setting next year, if not before. So happy to give an assurance on that point. On the first point about potential beneficiaries and the criteria for support for the cultural industries, I think the point Councillor Macaulay makes is exactly what we have in mind, that it be available to individuals and other groups as well as organisations. That point has been made on many occasions, and the criteria, though, will come back to Sustainable Development Committee in March for members to approve and consider.
Thank you very much.
Apologies if I've missed any other point.
Maybe blabbing on too much. Thank you for the explanation there. Sorry, I was alluding to 8.4. It is therefore recommended that the sum of 778,100 be retained to allow for corporate and service pressures, not necessarily for 2026-27 alone. That's what I was. That made me think it was going to get kept out of the Crown Estate.
Kenny, can you put yours off, Jeanette?
It would be.
Sorry, hold on. Somebody else is on. Noddy, could you put yours off? I've got a note of you, so I'll bring you on. Chief Executive.
Yes, it would be retained from next year's Crown Estate allocation, but if we anticipate it having to be used as we do, that will come back to this committee, and any underspent, any non-spent or unspent monies will come back also to this committee for reallocation, either within the year, towards the end of the year, I would think, or more likely at next year's equivalent of this committee.
But will it go back into the Crown Estate Fund?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I must be reading it wrong. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I've got Councillor Kenneth McLean online first. Kenny.
Hey, sorry, I'm sort of backtracking. I had my hand up
It's
really
okay.
well. It's just about the abattoir to say I'm sort of in agreement with Councillor from Harris. The nature of the cuts we're making to education, social care, transport, everything else, I'm just incredibly uneasy about supporting what is a commercial venture in every other corner of the UK apart from this one little one. But if we are going to keep the abattoir, again, there should be parity for Harris, Uist and Barra. And if that means we're only allowed one abattoir, it should be shifted to North Uist or Benbecula or something. It can't be in one end. It would be just as unfair if the abattoir was down in Barra to expect folks from Lewis to go through the additional costs of transporting cattle or sheep or what have you across ferries and all the rest of it. That's not subsidised. That has to be covered by the crofters up here. So in my opinion, it should either be cut or it should be made equal and fair to all the islands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McLean. Councillor McSween, I've got you next.
Thank you. I'm not a member of your committee. First of all, can I just get clarification on the fashion funding and how that will work? I'm then going to. Will I talk just now about abattoir, or will I?
Do fashion first, and then come back to abattoir.
Okay.
So, 8 point. Chief Executive. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Happy to clarify that point. In a way, it illustrates the point which I've just, which Councillor Macaulay has just brought up. We're suggesting it's such a small sum, it can be met from the current Crown Estate underspend, but that makes the point that any underspends in Crown Estate come back to this committee.
So all the fashion that take place throughout the Western Isles will not have to pay school-led fees.
That's my interpretation of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you have a question on that?
Yes, but just on the abattoir, I mean, it might not surprise anybody about what which viewpoint I'm going to take on this, but I think it is a very important service to protect for numerous reasons. We heard at the MAUG recently the risks to human and animal health with the dangers of increases in home kills, which is being reported that's already taking place. And there are risks and issues that are arising that haven't been seen in many, many years. These are the kind of the obvious arguments to make. I think there are other concerns that I have, that if you lose a service like the abattoir, the way particularly rural Lewis or Lewis in general, the population is shifting towards Stornoway and becoming less connected with the land and the way of life. I think there's a real risk in losing that connection with where food comes from. And as a society, it is a very dangerous thing. And that's what results in issues like we have with the people who are against the cuckoo hunt just now. People don't realise where their food comes from. In a previous role, I was taking groups I was working with groups from the Nicholson, and one of the things that we did was, it was usually boys who were there, and we visited the abattoir and saw what was happening, saw the results of many of the processes, and it had an impact on these people, that they realised what had to be given up to create our food. And again, in terms of food security, I think it's an important thing that we have these skills and retain the ability to protect ourselves. In COVID, there was no food on the shelves. We would have been okay because we had the backup of meat options here. And the other point is that, yes, commercial, we're mentioning, do we make it a commercial operation? Commercial operations like this are closing throughout the UK. We always look enviously at the mainland as this place where everything is better. That's not true. We don't have to follow what's happening on the mainland. They're closing these things. We should be leading the way. Why aren't we attracting people, not just in the Western Isles to use our services, but on the mainland to come over and use these services and facilities?
Thank you very much. I've got you, John Norman, but I've got Norman first, and then I'll come back to you. Norrie. Hold on a second. Someone's got their lights on. Sorry, Angus, I've got a note of you as well.
Yeah, there are some things I never thought I'd hear myself getting involved in or saying. Guga, for a start, I reserve the right to defend the Taoiseach's own right to pollute their kitchens with the foul smell of the Guga. I'll defend that. I find myself.
You want to come try some of mine?
Never, never. But there are things that are under threat and are under pressure. I was at the primary industries MAUG yesterday, where I found out the extent of what was happening with home kill, etc., and the danger to public health because of some of the stuff that was highlighted by Hector Lowe the vet. We need to be cognizant of these things, and for the sake of 50k, again, we're going back to Crown Estate money and this magical pot of money that we have in the Crown Estate, which does get hit regularly. And Colin alluded to the fact that crofting is very much part of our culture and our community, in the same way as the Guga hunt and the language and our cultural culture and our cultural arts are part of us. Crofting is something as well that's part of us. And if we can invest in the abattoir and make the price of a kill cheaper and run it so that we discourage home kill and the effects of home kill and the safety aspects of that and the danger to public health. It's not a huge danger, but there is definitely a danger to public health. So I find myself supporting taking money to help the abattoir. Also, we need to investigate, and I think we've done this, and it didn't come to much success. Speaking to the estates about deer kill, etc. So we have to try and explore throughput in the abattoir going forward. I'm for this as well. And as to the fund going to culture and the arts as well, I was disappointed not to have heard, particularly from Mouter, over the 3 years they had to get in touch with us about the money that was projected to be cut from their budgets over these 3 years. I am 100% behind on Mouter. I'm 100% behind cultural organisations. They did a very good campaign in getting in touch and helping the public discourse on culture, etc. But for 47.5k in the size of the budget of Mouter, there were many things they could have done to mitigate that over the 3 years that they didn't do. There was never a threat of closing Mouter. They do get good public support, I think, from the Comhairle, from culture. I think they got money from what was it? Levelling Up. I can't remember. 1.5 million last year. So 47.5k isn't huge in the size of the budget of an organisation like Mouter, who employ 34 people and do great outreach work for education. But I'm pro supporting the culture and the arts. But there were, the only representation I had about the Mouter directly into my inbox was somebody who said, a quick email to express my disappointment at the proposal to reinstate local authority funding at this late stage. It's not an argument against arts or culture. It's a concern about fairness, opportunity cost, and the responsible use of limited discretionary funds. You know, the withdrawal of this funding was clearly signposted, explicitly described as transitional and known to the organisation for a considerable period. Now, I'm glad that they've got the opportunity that we put money back into the culture and the arts for them to bid into and support them. But to say that organisations didn't have a chance to mitigate the cuts that we proposed 3 years ago, it would be wrong. It didn't come out of the blue for any of these organisations. They were well aware of what was going on. I'm glad to see that we can do something about it in the budget, and I hope that they recognise that we are 100% behind them. But at the same time, when we signpost things to cultural organisations, any organisations, be it sport, be it whatever, we will try to support them and try to help them. But at some stage, you've got to try and help yourselves as well. Same with the abattoir. We've got to try and work with people to support them in the short term while they can get over their funding difficulties. But we've got to try to encourage them to make better use of their resources to maximise their own incomes as well. So I'm grateful for the support being proposed for all of these things that have come forward through the Crown Estate distribution conversation. But again, there's only so much we can keep taking from Crown Estate, only so much we can keep taking from reserves. I'm glad for most of the proposals we've seen here today. But again, I want to highlight the fact that not everybody out there is of the same opinions. We see public support, but we see the public as well understanding that we're in a difficult situation and we need to make tough decisions as well. And some of them understand where we're coming from our original proposals, and we change our minds and we adjust according to public opinion, which is only right following a public consultation. So it's a difficult balancing act. I support what we're doing here, but I think the public are well aware of the difficulties and the fact that certain organisations, certain everything in our community needs to address the fact that money is tight, and we need to do everything we can to maximise what we can do in terms of supporting ourselves and these organisations in supporting themselves. I'm grateful we can provide a little bit of backup, but the Comhairle are in the same position as they are.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I've got a few councillors looking to come in still. I've got councillor, you were wanting to come back in, Kenny. Yeah, and then okay.
Yeah, just to check, the proposal to reduce council tax is obviously going to leave us with 150,000 loss. Will that come out of this 700 and
no, be it reserve, general
reserves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. John Norman, I got you next.
Thank you, Leader. You'll be pleased to know that Councillor Maxwell has practically said a lot of what I was going to say. But anyway, I'm very much in agreement with them. Just like to think, like those who sort of are not that supportive of the abattoir, have they ever thought of the consequences if there was no abattoir? There's a lot. It's not just sort of the increase in the home kill, but you got to remember local meat, local beef, local lamb. And if you go to the butchers and you speak to them, they use local meat from when the abattoir opens until it shuts. Right, that's one thing I want to say. The other thing, Councillor MacLeod Harris mentioned about not supporting that there shouldn't be an abattoir. Well, to be honest, if you went around the crofting communities, you would find out that there was nobody in their right mind that would want to start that business off again, because it probably wouldn't be viable for them. Okay, now I'm afraid that comes to sort of subsidising from the council, whatever, to keep it going. And yes, I mean, what isn't subsidised? We subsidise a serious amount. Now, I don't think the 50,000 from the subsidy from Crown Estate is a huge amount in the grand scheme of things. And I'll be honest with you, I'm very much very supportive of crofting communities. And if Euston Borough had issues with their abattoirs or wanted improvements or whatever, IS1 would be very supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll not draw the logical conclusion if crofters are not in their right minds to be running an abattoir. What does that say about us? Councillor McCormack, you are next.
Thank you very much, Leader. I am not a member of your committee. I wish very much to support the abattoir. I also wish to remind Councillor McSween that it isn't just deep rural areas that we have crofting in. We do have it just outside Stornoway and Sandvik North Street, and I have invited you to come down to see us. The crofters there would be very disappointed if there was no abattoir for them to use. I would like to also just mention that in Sandvik North Street, because they are beneficiaries of wind farm revenues, they have been able to enhance their grazings and build buildings and buy equipment. And that is another option that I think that our incoming wind farms should be looking at. How can they help the indigenous industries to improve? We are, of course, in discussion with these developers. So far, I must admit, I have been deeply disappointed by their response, and we really need to push home. But yes, I would like to support the abattoir as a vegetarian. I have no objection to other people eating poor animals. I wish also to say that I'm very comfortable with the resolution of the issue around the Encounter and other organisations, that they will have an opportunity to bid into a fund. They have known for a long time that this was coming and should have done something about it, and I don't think they've done anything about it, as Councillor MacDonald has said already, and I think they should have done. So I'm pleased that we've found a sort of halfway house for them to bid into. That gives me some comfort, because I too have always been very much involved in the arts, and as you probably know, my daughter is involved in the arts as well. So it's something that I feel we have to support, and I'm glad that we've been able to find a resource to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Racine, your light was on next, then Councillor Crichton, and I think that should help us come to the end of the meeting. Oh, sorry, and Angus online. So Mustafa first.
Thanks very much. I think it's a lot has been said. Obviously I'm a member of the MAUC for the abattoir, and sometimes we have different views of how things should be taken forward. I was just going to speak at the beginning, because when we talked about a short-term solution, but decision not to be made for long-term,
I think, and just as well, I think John Norman confirmed that Euston Barra are crofting communities as well, and I'm happy to hear that if we're taking a long-term decision about subsidizing the abattoir, that we need to look at how we subsidize or how we support, I think the right word used by John Norman, the abattoir in Euston Barra. I think probably I'm sitting here in a position, obviously, as a vice chair of Education Committee, and many times we discussed, something which is part of the corporate strategies, childcare, and early years, and we're struggling to find money for. Sometimes we discussed it in the budget that it could be at risk, the 0 to 2, which is not statutory. We were looking at, do we sacrifice that, or how do? So sometimes it's really difficult when we're talking about supporting abattoirs and things. And I think we need to put things into perspective. If we will carry on this year, I think a decision need to be made. Then I think, in the context of other priorities that we have, especially, corporate priorities like childcare, which has, I know we talk about closing the abattoir and an impact that will have on the crofting, but childcare has an impact not just on one community, the whole community, and the future of the Western Isles as it is, and as we want it to be. So, as far as so that's all I wanted to say. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Crichton and then Councillor Morrison online.
Chairman, thank you. It's been interesting to listen to all the views. I'd just like to move an amendment or an additional recommendation, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, well, I'll bring Councillor Morrison first and then we'll come back to you. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Peter. I hope you can hear me all right. I'm sorry, I'm moving in at a signal at the moment, but on the abattoir, being a member of the member officer working group, just a couple of observations to make to today's debate. The last meeting we had of the member officer working group, I felt was one of the best we've had for a long, long time. And I just wonder would be beneficial going forward for Councillor Crichton maybe to ask Hector Lowe, the vet, to come to make a presentation to his committee on the abattoir, because we heard a lot about disease and animal welfare. There was a very small number of animals that were condemned last year due to disease, which would have gone into the food chain if that had gone through home kill. And I think that's the importance of something we need to make the public aware of. Home kill is on the increase, but they're not aware of of what could happen through hydatid, etc. I think the other thing we need to bear in mind as well is that there is a high rates element on the cost of the abattoir, which came into the discussion at the last member of the working group. I'm not sure if Mr. Fraser, who's there today, has been able to get an answer for us when we're looking to try and get under crofting relief, if that's been achieved. That would save a considerable amount of money to the abattoir on a yearly basis. Now, I got quoted at this time last year as one of the people who said use it or lose it for the abattoir at this time of year. I think we need to put that message out again to keep it going for another year. People need to use it or lose it. What I was encouraged by was the statistics I saw at the last member of the working group per area for my own ward, the Lochs area, which had the largest number of sheep throughput of any other area in the Western Isles. If every area took the uptake that the Lochs area took on, I think the abattoir would be in a better place going forward. But going to the point of private operational issues, I'm currently on the mainland. I've had discussion with one or two people over the last few days about private abattoirs. You're probably aware that Donald Russell in Viruri has shut down in the past week with the loss of up to 120 jobs. That's a huge blow for the Northeast from a butcher point of view and an abattoir point of view. The other area that's under serious threat at the moment is Dingwall Abattoir. They are actually struggling at the moment as well. And it just shows the threat that we could end up with no abattoir in the Western Isles or up in the Highlands and northeast of Scotland, which would mean that most of the meat would then have to be transported from further down south. So I would propose that we keep it for another year at least. we could look at also taking some of the funding. I just wonder where we would be without Crown Estate actually when we come to our budget setting meetings, when we hear of everything we're taking off Crown Estate to support our services, and thankfully it is there. But I wonder if we could take part of the cost of the abattoir from what's going to be the balance that we left from the evening bus service once the buses come out to tender this at the end of this year. We're allocating 120,000 to evening bus services on Crown Estate. There will be a balance left there when we're asking operators to tender for evening bus services in this round of tenders. So there will be a small amount of money left there that could possibly be put towards the cost of the abattoir. It's the same service, municipal service, and are running both things, so it's out of the same budget. The balance I would hope would come out of the major reserve of coastal community that we're holding back, which I think would be a small amount if we took the other side in of what's the balance of the evening bus service. I don't think it would be appropriate to get off the ward side of things. I'm quite convinced that some wards wouldn't pay the £7,500 to support the abattoir ongoing. So these are just a few observations, and I would support that going forward. And on the other point, on the creative arts industry, I fully support the proposal to have this bidding in fund for the creative arts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morrison. Councillor Crichton, you were going to move.
Thank you, Chair. I think the Chief Executive already identified where the 60k would come from for the abattoir.
There's a suggestion that it could come from the wards or it could come from the 750,000. So there's a choice there.
Okay. Well, can I move an additional recommendation that we continue to fund the abattoir for the next financial year, and that the work of the MOU continue for this financial year to look at different models of putting it on a sustainable footing for the future, and that money comes from that central pot.
Yeah, just to reflect the feedback that's come through the committee today, to also include Euston Barra in that, so Western Isles wide, just to look at the wider.
There has to be a wide-ranging review of the service across the islands. Yeah.
Okay. So is the committee content with that additional recommendation? Yeah. Okay. So are there any other outstanding points in the Crown Estate report we need a steer on? The only point I was going to make was just in terms of 7.3 athletes travel. I think we should continue it, and I think at that level, the only slight change I would suggest is that the club sport committees have some flexibility on how they spend that money. I know some years they're not able to put it all towards athletes travel, but they have extra pressure on their general grant funds. So whether they have the flexibility to take a portion of that if required. So just a bit of flexibility for the groups to do that. That would be my suggestion. Committee content, Chief Executive.
Yeah. Chair, I think just for audit purposes, we'd want to amend the scheme of administration for that scheme, but that can go back to a future series.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, I think we covered quite a lot there. There are recommendations in the report at paragraph 3.1. Do we agree with recommendations? As amended? Yeah, agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to the end of this meeting. Next scheduled meeting of this committee will be on the 25th of March 2026, and we will see you then. Thank you.